We are live on the Tech Box podcast, episode 17 this week. It is July 15th. We're doing episode 17, and we're going to talk today about 17. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
I mean, when you look
Time.
back at when we started, yeah, it just flies by.
Yeah. Probably the first time I wore the Buffalo shirt.
Yeah, I thought you said last week you were going to wear the Buffalo shirt this week. So, man of his word, wearing the Buffalo shirt. We got it.
Yeah.
You got
Bring
a
it.
new background.
I got a
I
new
see there.
background and a great mic. I mean, we're racking on. Totally got it.
We're on like the upper echelon of amateurs. I don't think we're lower level professionals yet. We're still on the upper echelon of amateurs, maybe, but we're getting there. We've only done 16 episodes. This is our 17th. So, you know, you find your favorite dog podcasts, and we're climbing up those rankings. We're gonna be with your favorites pretty quick here.
Well, I think we like pick up like 100 some people, like just like
100 and some people in the last month on YouTube, so that's pretty fantastic.
very cool. Hey,
The thing that I love about YouTube, which hopefully everybody gets this, is first of all, you can see us. You can't see us on like Apple Podcasts or things like that. You just hear us. So you can see our Tuesday shirts every week. You can see, if Jane ever decides to pop on, we can see her. You can see our expressions on things. But also, YouTube's on every device. You can watch it on your TV. I know. Shout out to Kathleen. She's like, I've thrown you guys up on the TV on YouTube before while I'm doing house chores and stuff. And yeah, so it's available on every device. It's not like Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts where it's like you're only available on that. YouTube's everywhere. So if you haven't subscribed to YouTube, there's a shout out and the plug to subscribe on YouTube.
if you're driving home and you want to keep track of something, or to stay awake, YouTube, it's awesome.
Yeah, that and I don't promote watching videos while you drive, but hey, you know what? It's nice to have on and listen to, and maybe you peek over every once in a while. But we drove home from Castle Rock last night, and groups went. The show was yesterday, and the groups got over at 5:30 in Castle Rock, Colorado. So then we're going through Denver at 5:30.
Was that?
What's that?
How big a show was that?
800 some entries. Yeah, and it's like groups got over at 5:30. We went through Denver traffic. It was 12:30 in the morning when we got home last night. But to stay awake, I mean, it was like, yeah, you got to turn some YouTube on, listen to some of the Tech Box podcasts, and be
Exactly.
entertained.
Yeah, because if nothing else, we're entertaining.
We're at least entertaining, and that's why you have to watch it too. Because why not get entertainment and good looks? Speaking
So
of that,
this week, don't we? This week, we're gonna Kathleen ask a question about pedigrees.
yeah. So I've been getting a ton of questions about pedigrees, and Kathleen specifically is like, you guys need to do a podcast on this because I'm waiting, and I've asked this question a million times. So I was like, okay, you know what? You got it. We'll do it just for you. So I want to talk about pedigrees, and you know what? When she brought it up, it's like, you know what? Some of this makes sense, and I have a ton of questions about pedigrees too. So we got some questions that are going to come from a tenured person, some questions that are coming from a newbie. So this is going to be a really good topic of conversations on pedigrees and how different they are. Because I know we mentioned it last week a little bit too when we were talking about importing, like pedigrees overseas compared to American pedigrees. So
Absolutely. So the pedigrees are dogs. This is not just fancy parchment paper. It's not like 23andMe of your pet. I mean, your pedigree is your roadmap, and it is how it's the plan. I mean, it's how you're going to go, what direction you want to do, and there's a couple of really key features to pedigrees. So pedigrees that have DNA behind them are obviously perhaps more accurate, provably accurate. With a lot of the American Kennel Club pedigrees, if a stud dog's been used 3 times in a year or 7 times lifetime, they require them to have DNA. But DNA is, validating the accuracy of the pedigree, which super cool because I mean, we have, their mistakes can be made by accident, by purpose, by whatever. But that pedigree, using that pedigree and the microchipping, it can really tell you a lot. And then one of the huge features to a pedigree is your coefficiency. So your coefficiency tells you how power packed your pedigree is, how broad it is. So like if you took two unrelated dogs together and you did a father daughter brother sister breeding, those puppies would have like a coefficiency of 25. And the coefficiency is on the good aspect because like in everything there's good and bad. Did you get pedigrees when you got your first dogs?
Yeah. So when I got my first dogs, I get pedigrees with all my dogs, or at least want to look at them just to see. I mean,
Sure.
mainly because I got my first dogs from Barb, so then she was very like, here's the pedigrees and here's what I'm going for. I want the CH in front of everything. I want a full champion pedigree and all the things, and she's kind of showing me pedigrees, and a lot of her lines are from you, Touche, so there's like the sire side's all Touche, and when you're just kind of learning, you're just like, cool, but what does this mean? What are you seeing? And then you start to recognize some types of things. If you're brand spanking new, you don't even know like the higher kennel names. I'm just like, Touche, what's that? And like, well, that's the kennel name. Well, who's Dale? What the hell is this? So
So I mean, those pedigrees they tell you a lot about where your dog came from and the path that you took to get there. So if you were just a pet breeder, if you go on chat AI, they would tell you, oh, if you breed totally non-related dogs, you will have more puppies with less genetic defects, and that's true. That's true. If you breed totally unrelated animals together, statistically speaking, you will have more puppies, perhaps less possibility of defects, less possibility of that. But on the flip side, you don't get consistent type. You don't get the traits that you want. You don't get, when you're talking about the markings, the shape, the size, the temperament, all of those things, all of those inherent traits. What breeders do is like by staying within a family line of dogs, they get a um, a consistency of type, and that's just like nationality of people. You know, I mean, the people in one area, like, oh, everyone's blonde hair, blue eyes, blah 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 blah. That it goes because they'll say those are traits that go to that nationality. Well, because they probably bred all in the same continent type thing. And the tighter the pedigree, the more consistent the offspring. So, breeders are always walking that balancing act of how tightly they can breed and still maintain health and temperament and soundness, you know, and yet get consistency of type that we want for our companions, the things that they have that we desire in them. So whenever you have whenever you have a pedigree and they'll have there's basically three types of breeding: line breeding, inbreeding, and outcrossing. And the outcrossing would be the zero coefficiency, which will mean, probably statistically healthier, more random types, type of puppies. And then line breeding would be dogs that were of a similar family, cousins, grandfather, granddaughter, niece, nephew, have a dog. Your Elon dog, doesn't he have have some of the same names in there several times?
yeah, he's got some, and Grandpa is quite a few times on the pedigree.
Yep. Yep. And the more consistent, more of that you have, the less possibilities they have of producing random types of dogs. And then of course your inbreeding, which is father daughter brother sister mother son. To civilians who are not dog breeders, that's like, oh, that's terrible. That's not really. I mean, if you know what you're doing, if you are prepared and you have a good feel for that, the tighter you breed, the more, I mean, you're going for bigger things, but you can also take bigger losses, and that's, I always kind of, when people talk about breedings, I kind of, well, what what kind of risk reward are you willing to take? If the tighter your breedings, well, you might not get testicles on the boy puppies. You could have open fontanelles, all of those little defects that will show up, as your coefficiency climbs and climbs and climbs, you know, but you also get more type. They get prettier, get fancier, which are more desirable people. They're more appealing to look at.
To see, so when looking at a paper pedigree, you don't see that though, right? You don't see the coefficiency. You can't.
You have to run that. So you're going to see the names, and you're going to see how, if the names are repeating. And then you're going to have to, like, I would say, for especially when you're trying to learn about a pedigree, you want probably 5 generations. So you can get kind of a feel, and then you can turn around. There was some really great pedigree programs out. One of them was called Ingrus, Ingrus, and they had pictures, so you could go see the different dogs in there, and you could kind of get a feeling for it. But almost anytime you see dogs that are more extreme in type, they're going to be a more line bred. The other thing is, those dogs will probably tend to be more dominant as to what they produce. Those are your more effective stud dogs, and that type of thing. You're going to get, you're going to, because they have a more specified pool that they can pull from. And so the traits they have, they're going to be more dominant for.
Yeah, and that's something. I mean, that's a podcast that I've already discussed with you. Like, we have to do a podcast on line breeding and um, mainly because there's that can go so deep. But as far as pedigrees go, is there so say I'm brand new to a breed and I'm looking for a puppy and I ask, like, what do the parents look like, and what's the pedigree look like? Like, what should you be looking for if you're looking at a puppy and you see the pedigree? Is there certain things that, like, I need to see the pedigree so I can look for this on it, or things that I should stay away from when I look at a pedigree? What are we actually trying to figure
Okay.
out on there?
All right. So we're just going to take the jump that we're breeding these dogs, and that we're breeding dogs, and that we are looking for a breeding show dog. And so a pedigree that has line breeding it has a family line. Um, people might say, "Oh, it's all champions." I mean, that could be good. I mean, at least it's a benchmark of some quality, but it doesn't necessarily. It's only as good as the champions are that they were shown. So I mean, if it's a high competition breed, and those were top quality dogs, well, that is a little bit of a plus. But you really want to, if you're seriously wanting to breed and show dogs, you need to work within a family line. Even when you have, like, gotten into a family line of dogs, because the smaller your program is, the fewer dogs you have that you're breeding, the more you have to be particular on that. Because if you're going to do 15 litters of puppies, well, then you can just, like, lock a bunch of monkeys with a bunch of typewriters and come back and see if you got a great book. I mean, but when you're trying to target quality and trying to really work towards something, then staying within a family line of dogs is going to be more consistent for you. And I would think as though that this is true in almost any kind of livestock, any kind of breeding type of thing. They will find those traits in cattle, which you probably are more versed about than me. They'll talk about the studs, and they'll put on the birth weight of the calves, that they're low birth weight but rapid gain. All of these things are because of documentable pedigrees, where they can say this is statistically what you're going to get. And the more outcrossed, the more random, you're going to have less predictable results. So that's what and of course, I mean, pedigrees for as far as, like, pet people go, it's just kind of fun. It's kind of like you go on It's like you go and do your family ancestry and you're like, oh, who am I related to famous? Well, that doesn't necessarily make you famous. I mean that, oh, so you have a great pianist in your family. Doesn't mean you know how to play the piano, you know. So I mean, but as far as the pedigree goes, as far as for the breeder, it's your blueprint. It's your long-term goal. And it really kind of gives you, and the more you know the dogs involved, the more valuable it becomes. Because then you kind of go on there and go, oh, well, that's this, and you know what's good and you know what's not so good. And you know at what point that you're gonna need to outcross.
See, and I think that's what's like really. I think the more you're into it, and as a breeder or a show person, the more you can, let's just say Japanese chin, and I'll just use me as an example. Coming brand new in, I didn't know kennel names. I didn't know certain dogs. Now things like that. Now it's like I can look at pedigrees and I can see things, and it's like, oh, that's this kennel, or that's, this dog, and that actually means something because I know what that dog has either produced, or whether, say, it's a dog that's ranked and is out campaigning now, like Mr. Perfect or something like that. It's like, some of their heritage and things like that because you've studied it and you've been around long enough to kind of get that. As a new person looking at a pedigree, it's just like, what is this mumbo jumbo? And maybe they don't know. So maybe as a new person that's like wanting to purchase their first show dog and they can see a pedigree, maybe you're looking for that repeat name on the pedigree to know, like, hey, there's been some line breeding going on, so they were looking for a certain feature that they were doubling down on. You're kind of, is it fair to say, if you're looking for a show dog, you should and you don't know much about your breed or kennels or dogs in general in that breed, that you should be looking for some, like, a duplicate, so that it's like, this has been line bred, they were really going for type. Is that fair?
Well, absolutely, because the more that when you start seeing if you look at a pedigree and there's line breeding and stuff that have been done there, odds are those are more known dogs. There's more information available on them. You can find out if there's more production, like this dog produced X number of champions, this dog was this dog lived to 15 years of age with great health. I mean, because it's not only what you want to see more of, it's what you want to see less of. So the pedigree is a very useful tool breeding away from faults. Because, and here's something that I was talking to someone today about, and I thought it was a pretty valid point, and where people get really nutted up on a fault or problem, or it's like, oh, they're this or that, and then they obsess on it. It's like, oh, but we've got this problem. That's this problem, and they can't kind of get past it. They will turn around and they'll either import or buy some breeding that they know nothing about. They know absolutely nothing about, and they take such comfort in not having any information. You are so much better off knowing the faults. You are so much better off dealing with the imperfect animals that you have, that you know the truth on. Because, when you're importing from Inga in Bulgaria or wherever, I mean, what's she gonna? Oh yeah, they all perfect. Okay, great. That's reassuring. Don't knowledge is always, even if it's knowledge of something not so good, is invaluable. So it's like, okay, well, this dog, he needed a better rear, so I want to make sure that he was bred to stronger. Maybe if we're having some rear issues, maybe we don't want to double on this dog because he was a great dog. That was his fault. We're not going to double on his fault. We're going to double on his strengths, and we're going to breed away from his faults. So, I mean, because, and I think as though that sometimes people take the faulting of the dogs a little personal, and it's not personal. It's not personal. You just have to, you kind of go, well, these are your strong suits. This is the good stuff about here. Here's where we want to go away from. And that is the magic of working with a family line of dogs, because then you go, well, that breeder, they really like pretty faces. If you see their name in that, they probably have really good faces, they had really good coats. They had this, they had that. Okay. That's what their dogs were known for. So when you need that trait in your dogs, you go, well, I want to go to them. Mary's dogs had great movement, blah, blah, blah. You know, that's where the pedigrees become priceless, and where you can actually make those really, and those dogs behind there that have ongoing history. Then you say puppy out of puppy out of puppy out of puppy, and you go, wow, those are really nice puppies out of that dog, and they seem to be really healthy, and they seem to have really great, very desirable. That's really fantastic. Like, for example, we have a stud dog. In fact, you just bred to him. That his mother came out of retirement to start being specialed again, and went for however many, she was like winning groups and so forth. And I mean, and that's his mom, still healthy, still strong, you know, going in there 7, 8 years of age, still, as from a veteran standpoint, looking great. Well, that's a dog you want to line breed on, you
She's
know.
ranked number 2 owner handled too.
Yes, she is.
Well, for now, for now.
Right. Right. So I mean, but that tells you, when you see that dog's name and pedigree, going, wow, that dog came back at 7 or 8 years of age after having three litters of puppies and was competing at that level. That's a name you want in your pedigree. That's a quality, long-lived, healthy dog that is like, yeah, we want that. We don't want just like, oh, here's a picture and it went away. We want that ongoing history. And I think that's one thing that, like, social media puts a little bit of life into our pedigree. So we get to see about, about older dogs, and we kind of can keep up with a little bit more what's going on. But those pedigrees and stuff, they are invaluable information.
They are, and if you know what you're looking for, and if you
Yeah.
know what you're seeing in there too. And I've had, even from when I first was getting into chin, I've had breeders not show me a pedigree before and not be willing to. I asked for a pedigree. They're like, nope. And it's like, I don't know why they wouldn't, because you can go all that to say, like, you can go on AKC's website and get a pedigree for any dog that you want. I mean, you're gonna have to pay for it if you want it, but you can go get it. It's pretty public information, and there's other sites out there where you can go find, kind of dig up pedigrees and stuff. But
I can tell you why, because I might be that person, because I'm super lazy and I already know them.
yeah,
You know, it's like, yeah, I own them. Okay, I own them. I enjoy looking at pedigrees of my dogs. So, oh yeah, that was that trip over to Australia. That was that dog. That kind of thing. I mean, it's kind of like, your vacation planner for the last 25 years. It's like, oh, it was there, 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 there. But no, there's value to them. And the more you know about the dogs involved, the more valuable the pedigrees become. And even when you get to the point where you get to an inbreeding coefficiency, all right, and this is for this varying breed to breed to breed. We're going to talk about 10 because that's what you have. Some some breeds can take tighter line breeding with no ill effects and only benefits than others. Other breeds, you're going to start to lose production. You're going to have a higher mortality rate, and you're going to have a higher rate of defects. And the more fragile the breed is, that number is going to be a thing for you. So that's where, at that point, where you're going to go, I've got to breed out, because my litter sizes are getting smaller. My puppies are not as thriving. When I do that, I might need to outcross to lower that COI and to get a stronger, bigger, better, badder litter. And that's why you go out. But in going out, you don't just go ahead and say, well, I'm going to breed to any unrelated dog, because that's going to lower my CO. You want to breed to a dog that is from a family. He himself, although an outcross to your dog, is line bred himself onto a family. And then at that point in time, those outcrosses won't, just like, because otherwise it's like, just like, can decimate your type. It's like you bred to something that was like a different breed. And whereas if you can take your pedigree that's already getting a little snug, Your family tree is looking like a telephone pole. You know, no offense to anybody from Arkansas, but I mean, y'all do go to family reunions to meet people. Um, but there is at that point in time, you want to outcross, but you want to get something that is from a family line, so that you can bring in and say, well, and hopefully that family line will be known for animals of this trait. And hopefully that's the trait you're needing in your dog.
Okay, so what do you when you see a pedigree and there's zero, it's all outcross. It's just all a random bag of cluster. Like, what are your thoughts? Like, where do you go mentally? Just like, holy cow, this is just a mixed bag of jumbo mumbo.
I think you used the first part of it, cluster, but the so that we call a line breeding to every dog in the breed. You're a line breeding to everybody. And so that is a purebred mutt, per se. I mean, and it could be a fluky, beautiful dog that is like lovely. But, and so, all right, just to talk about my own fluky, beautiful dog, my first Japanese Shin, which is probably one of the most beautiful dogs in the breed, who was a best in show winner. His pedigree was a line breeding to everybody. There was like no plan here. They were just like, well, we had a couple of them and they were in the yard and they had some, and all of a sudden we had this beautiful dog appears. Well, okay. But as a stud dog, it took generations to have him make an effect because we had to breed him to his granddaughters. We had to like line breed in on him because he himself bred to an unrelated female. They were none of them looked like him, I mean, at all, because he was like a just a random purebred Japanese Chin. But and the puppies were not consistent. He himself was the result of an open pedigree. So, and then at that point in time, it took a long time before we could go ahead and circle back and build by putting the bitches with him and then holding back and then doubling. I mean, it was a multi-generational thing. And he didn't really sire himself until we got him like in the pedigree 2, 3 times. And we could get puppies that were more resemble him. We probably get more puppies that resemble him now than we did when he was alive, just because his pedigree was so open. So to a serious breeder, an open pedigree is a lot of work. And that's I mean, that's just I mean, if you like if you're breeding for a purpose, for a type, for a look, for a line, then that is like a road to nowhere. And good production, you probably healthy enough, that kind of thing, because there is like the COI is like a 0, you know, but not a great stud candidate.
Yeah, and so thinking pedigree, I'm picturing one in my head, like right in front of me, and I'm looking, and it's just like there's not a lot of DNA on there. So if they have DNA in AKC system, right, it says DNA on there and it has the number. And if there's not that, then they don't have the DNA in their system. So what have you seen in your tenure with pedigrees? Like, how accurate really are they if they don't have DNA in there? Is there some flundering around that people do? Because it's like you can say this is the sire and this is the dam, and without DNA, there's really
All right, so this comes down to the credibility of the people involved. So, like, if you have someone that's a serious player that has like long-term goals, they're not just cutting their bitch and heat out in the yard with 5 different males that are actually like playing, that are like serious hardcore breeders, because you might get one really nice dog out of a fluky thing, but you're not going to get consistently nice dogs out of a fluky situation. So the quality of the people you're dealing with definitely add to the credibility of the pedigree. You know, People who are serious about it, they take it more seriously. You know, that's where your imported pedigrees, same thing applies. If they're, and I mean, actually, And I know that everybody likes to say, "Oh, I'm a small home breeder, and I only have one litter every 3 years, and it's born on a little cloud in heaven," and blah blah blah. Well, all right, more accidents happen in the home breeder situation than people that actually have kennels, because the home breeder people, you know, that don't have a kennel, don't that are not keeping their dogs and bitches separate, they have a higher likelihood of having accidents because the dogs are all hanging out and you didn't catch that they were in heat and the kids left the baby gate open and you just had like a ditty freak off going on in the den, and you don't know who's getting bred, and so yeah, the more serious people, their pedigrees probably have a little bit more bang for the buck, and that would go for here and abroad. That's my experience, and basically when you start as a breeder, you take what you've got, you get the information you've got, and then you take that and you start going forward. And every step, every generation you do, that's all the truth comes to life. That's when because it's like, oh, I've never had that fault in my dogs. Well, you breed two of those dogs together and you get a whole litter of it. Hmm. Wow. What are the odds of that? They have heard of that. They've had it before. They're just you know not owning up to it. So that's when you get to find, and that's one thing. I never throw any shade on someone's dogs. So as far as like, if someone lets you breed to their dogs, don't complain about the faults you're going to get. They, because you'll get different faults than what you had before, but they shared, and so now it's up to you to go forward and make that work. You can decide whether I want to incorporate or don't want to incorporate, but don't be a butthead about it, because you tried, and you're not guaranteed success. You're just getting the option to try, part of the gambling thing, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's unless you're unless you're line breeding, I mean, you're taking a huge gamble, right? I mean, line breeding is not quite as much of a gamble because you're purposely breeding traits that you're looking for that you're line breeding. Other than that, yeah, it's a big mixed marble bag of marbles, and you're gonna toss them on the floor and see what colors come out. But um, I think on the pedigrees, n- I think when new people, I mean me specifically, when I came in, it was just like I didn't know what I was looking at. I liked seeing champion and grand champion, but that can be a mixed bag too because you show a dog long enough, it's probably gonna finish. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
Let's be real honest, it's not hard to finish a dog. I mean, it's not hard to finish a l maybe maybe I should reword that. It's not hard to finish a low competition breed. You can finish a dog by going to enough shows, you're gonna end up finishing most likely.
You can manipulate the wins, of course.
Yeah. So, seeing champion seeing champion doesn't right away, it meant so much to me, and now the more I'm learning and the more I'm getting in and the more that I see a vision for what I wanna do as a breeder, the more that a pedigree it goes so much deeper when you know what you're looking for and where you want to go. Because it's like when you see a mixed bag, like you said, on a pedigree, it's like, well, were any of these breeders that added to this pedigree really looking for anything? Were they did they have a purpose for breeding, or was it really just I'm going to breed so I can sell puppies and make a few bucks, and I don't have a purpose. I didn't pair these two dogs together, and I really like looking at them now, and when I can see like they tell a story like you said and you can see like hey this breeder had a purpose for breeding this dog with this dog. They had a purpose because I can see it in the pedigree based on what they did previously and what they did next. And I mean it's really paints a really nice picture when you have a good breeder that is doing things with a purpose and you can see the pedigree through 4 generations from that one breeder what they did with it.
And like when you go ahead and look on there, like say like if you say that this bitch is a group winner. Okay. If you look at a pedigree and you go group one winning bitch, that's probably a pretty good bitch. You know, this dog wanted a national specialty, probably a pretty good dog. This one produced, you know, 25 champions. Well, odds are That's a better than average dog. So it's not, just champion. That's not bad. That's a good thing. It should mean that they don't have any disqualifying faults and that they're reasonably sound mentally and physically enough to obtain a championship. But what more did they do? What's their bigger contribution? Did they stay healthy a long time? Did they sire a lot of champions in a limited number of breedings? Did they win big? Like, I mean, because that kind of stuff is all, I mean, you have to look at it for what it is. But one of my favorite breeders of all times was a lady from Michigan, and she kind of created the party color cocker. And her program consisted of basically 10 generations of half brother, half sister breeding. And her dogs were so consistent and so pure to type that even though she's dead and gone and the dogs are all dead and gone, you can still see that today because that was such a pure type. You can see that look of dog is still today. And because it was, now granted, there are downsides to that kind of breeding because the faults that they really have them because it's a telephone pole. But the qualities are there, you know, and the traits that if you want those traits, if you admire those traits, you got them because it's locked and loaded. So, and if you want to make a big scale type of thing and not kind of, it's like people go, oh, well, you know, I had all my whole litter. It was all this and this. Like, well, you're going to have, if you want to shoot for tens, you're going to have a few ones, you know? So, I mean, if you're happy with a litter of fives, party on, then maybe that's a good spot for you. But if you want to go a little deeper, play a little, play at the high stakes table, well, then breed a little tighter. Do a little bit more research on those dogs. Find out what you got going on there, and then that's when you make. It's like when you look at the pedigree on your dog, you can say, well, that dog came from here, that dog came from there. Well, those were selective outcrosses that we brought in for dogs that we wanted from family lines that we admired, and that's to hopefully add into the overall, the thing, because a bloodline, which is what the pedigree is the story of a bloodline, is a living body of work, and it's only as good as the last generation. Oh, so I mean, you can't write off you know, 5 generations ago, those were really good dogs, but they've just gone to shit since then. No, it's got to keep going. It's got to keep getting better and keep working in there. And when you outcross, you can maybe lose a little bit of something, but maybe pick up something else. You know, it's, I think it's serious homework for serious dog people.
But so valuable, so valuable. And I like what you said is like, just because it says champion or grand champion, great. Like they've got there. They've beat other dogs in the eyes of judges for, their two majors, their 15 points. Hey, they got there, they earned it. But what makes them better? Like what's that doesn't tell the quality. It doesn't tell that, if you're a head breed, it doesn't tell that they had like, oh, this amazing head, this absolutely gorgeous head. All it says is that they're a champion. It doesn't say whether they had a great coat, whether
Exactly.
they won because they had fantastic movement. It doesn't say that, hey, he had a huge rear end and, like that was the fault, or that gorgeous head but didn't move very well, or moved really good but had a short coat. It doesn't tell any of that. So that's where you kind of have to go and dig a little bit deeper on your own aspect of like, well, what was this dog's, pros and cons, and try to figure out that. And, if the breeder doesn't tell you, what are some avenues, maybe if you're looking at a pedigree and you want to know about a dog that's 4 generations ago and the breeder, maybe isn't alive. And, how do you find out what the pros and cons of that dog were? Is there like resources online where you can kind of look things up like that?
So some of it you can go back through, some of the parent clubs will have historical stuff like that, and you can do a little bit of like get show records. You can talk to breeders, and just like anything else, you're going to get, You've got to filter it out because some people are going to go, oh, it was the greatest ever, and maybe it wasn't. And some people will say, oh, it's pure trash, or maybe it wasn't that either. So you've got to kind of, find out, kind of listen, and make your own decisions. Kind of make that thing in there. Make do the research on it, see what you think, look at the pictures, look at the judges it won under, because that's one thing. If it won a big win or national or a top win under some of the really judges that were really well respected, you can probably say with a little bit of certainty that was probably a pretty decent dog, that kind of thing. That all of those things are relative. You don't just look at it and go, champion, end of story, great dog. No, that just means it's a starting point. And it might be a great dog, might be a good dog, might not even be, might be just okay. That's where you got to figure out and find out. And it's not just about like looking at pedigree, looking there and counting the champion stuff. Because then at that point, it's just a marketing tool to show to people and press the socks off of them, because most of us can't trust our pedigree back more than a couple generations. Our pedigrees aren't probably near as good as our dogs, not, God knows, not the thought was put into it, but that the dog, the better pedigrees, that's where the kennel names come in, and you can start to trace them down there and see the dogs that really made and shaped the breed. And you go into there and find your top producer dogs, the ones that like sired a good number of champions that everybody used or everybody wanted puppies out of. Those are your more significant dogs, that have produced a lot. And one thing, like when you talk about a breed that's hard to raise or hard to show, if a dog's produced a good number of champions, probably pretty good dog. You know, there was a Maltese that sired a gazillion champions, well over 100 champions. And, I mean, and his set type and had lots of national and best in show children, and that was in that dog was line bred and inbred on for decades, and kind of set type, you know, now people say, oh, it wasn't perfect. Well, what is? But that's not the point. It was really good, and you knew what you had when you got it. And that's what the breeder, your goal is to know what you have, to know, good and bad. Be honest about it, with at least with yourself. Lie to everybody else if you need to, but at least be honest with yourself, and then make your choices smart.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's just that a pedigree is what's right in front of you. It's what you physically can see on this piece of paper. It doesn't tell a whole story. It paints a pretty picture. It can paint a really nice picture, but it can also just be text on a piece of paper. And one of the things that I figured out through my experience over the last year is really like, if you really want to dig deep, you can dig as deep as you want to go. You can go back 5 generations. You can look at a dog and a kennel name, and you can find that dog. You're gonna find it somewhere. Whether it's there's so many resources. You can go to your parent club, and there's a lot of pedigree knowledgeable people there. I mean, we're in an old sport with a lot of older people that have been probably were around when that dog was
Sure.
in its heyday and will recognize that name. So you do have to put in a little bit of research yourself if you really want to see the full picture that this pedigree is painting. But you look at enough pedigrees, you're going to start seeing some commonalities in names, and you're going to start recognizing what dogs are good. I knew I knew some of your stronger dogs through history without even talking to you before we really started talking. I knew some of your stronger dogs just by looking at pedigrees, and it's like, well, Scintilla's on here a ton. Then you start looking around in some breed club stuff, and it's like, oh, well, this dam has produced so many damn champions. It's like, of course she's a good dog and she produces good dogs. So my guess is she's probably got a good line breed on her. And, you know, so you really, it's the piece of paper that tells you the kennel name and the names of the dogs, but it's really when you start digging in further that you can see how good of a picture is actually really painted with the pedigree.
If you're going to be a serious breeder, you need to take that, and then you need to go deeper and find out what made them good, where where the production was, where the quality was, and then to, where the areas of improvement needed to be, where you needed to go to, can always use better this and better that. And that's, I think that embracing your faults, knowing what they are, super huge, because they call that, when you don't know what your faults are in your dogs, they call that being kennel blind, where you just like slap on those rose colored glasses when you walk into the kennel and just like go, oh, well, they're all perfect. Like, well, yes, they are, but they're not really, and so that's when, really good breeders go and say, we need to work on this. And even though those people over there, we might not like them, we could maybe even more than not like them, but they have this in their dogs. Suck it up. We're going to work it out. And at that, I remember one year I was at a national and had some really pretty puppies in there. And I was totally bummed out because they weren't mine. I thought, gosh, what's the recipe that made that? And I like got my laptop open. I'm like going, oh, before that day was over, I bought a dog from out of the country that was key part of all of those dogs. The very following year, he was the number one stud dog for the breed. You know, it shows like that's the power of the pedigree. You can see the type and the things that that family line is producing, and you can decide whether you want to incorporate that.
It's almost like a recipe card, really. I mean, you can kind of see, what ingredients went in to make this dog and go from there. And you mentioned something about breeders, and it's like this doesn't have anything to do with pedigrees, but sort of kind of could, I guess. So there's two things I really hate about breeders. One, breeders that think everything they produce is gold, and then breeders who can't see anything good about them. They think every dog, all they can point out is the faults, and it's like, well, how can you have a successful breeding program, like a successful one, if the only thing you can see is faults? Because you got to be able to double down on something good, right? Otherwise, you're just like trying to breed faults out, and it's just like, well, if you can't see anything good, you're just going to think everything's a fault, and then everybody else that thinks that they don't have a fault, and it's like, well, there's not the perfect dog out there. There's faults somewhere. Like, you got to be able to see it, and you got to be able to see the good thing. Otherwise, you're just taking a bag of marbles and throwing them out, hoping you get something good. Because if you can't see a good thing, can't pair, right? You couldn't pair it up with what you're trying. If you can't find a good in a dog, you're just breeding it to something to make puppies and hope you get a good one out.
Well, it's called believing your own advertisement. I mean, you paid for that. It's kind of like your mother loving you. You didn't really do anything great for that. That just happened. So you have to, that's where, you know, your dogs, when they continually stay good and how they continually, it's like, it's one thing to be a good competitor. It's a whole nother skill set to be a good breeder. And so sometimes we have really good competitors. There may be excellent groomers. There may be hardcore show people that travel extensively and they'll drive all night like you did, and all of that, to get in there to get to the show. That's great, but that's not a breeder skill. The breeder skill is to be able to step away and look at that pedigree and say, yeah, those are all champions. Some of them were good. These were not as good. We want to double on these, not double on those, and be able to have the objectivity to step away. And I know I sell this story periodically, but there was one time we were heading home from Astro Hall and I shut the van door, and we had won something crazy big with something we were showing. And I'm like flying high, I was like, oh, we just won. And and I told Janice, I didn't even think that dog was that good. And she took me and said, oh, it's not. You know, it's like, what were they smoking? That was a joke. Like going, hey, well, there you go. That just like, okay, but you every now
Way
and
to bring
then
me
you
back down to earth.
here we are back in planet Earth. It's like going, yeah, they probably blind. But so I mean, just be objective about it, good and bad. And even though when the van doors close, be objective about your competition's dogs. Maybe they got something that you might want to incorporate. Maybe they're good competition because of not just politics and stupidity and senility of the judges. Maybe they have some nice dogs, or maybe they have something about their dogs that's nice that is, you know, whether it's a better coat or whether it's a better color, marking, size, showmanship. Maybe there's something there that made them good competitors. You know, and I mean, and that's the one thing that is not genetic is grooming, and that's probably the biggest non-pedigree type of part of it is like in grooming breeds, people who are very skilled and very talented groomers that can really do a great job, they might win more than their dogs maybe deserve just because of the extremely good conditioning and presentation. So when you're looking at it, just look at it honestly. You know, just the haircut doesn't transfer to the puppies. You know whether or not that someone's really good at keeping a tail wrapped doesn't necessarily mean that the puppies are going to grow. You know what I'm saying? You got to be honest about it and know why you won or why you lost and what you need to add into your dogs and look honestly at that pedigree and see, do I have this in my dog?
Yeah, and it's again, you got to be able to step back and look at it, and I think that's the first and foremost thing. And I think something, that I might struggle with even when it comes to like new breeders is just like, hmm, you don't really have anything as a new breeder, right? You just buy some dogs that you're like, I want to show these dogs and I need to get in. So it's like I got to get some dogs, and now you got, five different pedigrees that are completely weird, and maybe you got a little bit of line breeding on one, maybe you don't, and it's just like, well, shit, where do you even go from here? It's almost one of those where it's like, and I'm pretty sure a lot of new people make the same mistakes. Like, you don't think about that prior because you learn as you go, and then you look back on and you're like, well, if I would have known this when I started, I would have done this different. Well, that's just life, right? So, um,
It is. You're going to go in there. You're going to make some impulsive decisions. You're going to make some that was the right choice at the right time. But when you start to go to breed, you need to pack it up. You need to figure out what needs to stay, what doesn't need to stay, what is good, what is not. Because if you don't like certain traits, if you don't like, oh, I don't like it when they look like this or do this or whatever, well, then don't breed it. I mean, if it's something you really don't like, cut it out. Say, okay, well, no, that's a deal breaker for me. I can't, I don't, I don't want one dog with this, and I sure as heck don't want a litter of dogs like that. And then like even when you have stuff that in your pedigrees, if there's things that you don't like we have a markings breed, so we need to be pay really close attention. Is the white starting to creep up into their ears? Do they are their masks getting too wide? Keep doubling on that, and you're going to have half masks and white ears and predominantly all white dogs. And then that's all you'll have. Good luck. You line breed on it to a certain point, and you won't be able to get color back on the dogs, right? So that's where you have to kind of go in there and go, maybe I need to do this. Maybe I need to address this, of your things. So those are your hallmark qualities. And when you go through that pedigree and you start looking on there, what did these really good dogs have to offer? What was their hallmark quality that I can see in this type wise that I'm going to continue to add in? And that's where knowing what you have, perfect or imperfect, is always better than being blissfully ignorant, you know, tootling around with a big long pedigree and a whole bunch of health clearances in one hand. Well, it doesn't mean you're going to get anything. You could just as well be breeding doodles. You've got you've got to have a knowledge of what you have, type wise, bloodline wise, so you can do a good pedigree.
there's only so much a piece of paper can tell you. Sometimes you have to use your eyes and your brain and your knowledge of it to actually see, because there's a lot more to a pedigree than what the piece of paper says. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot more. It can paint you a nice little picture, but the deeper you dig, the better painting that you get out of it, and the better vision you get. And it's a lot of the same with the health testing. That could be a whole nother topic. But it's like you can get a passing health test, but it's like there's bigger, deeper stories that can go along with it too. So
that pedigree can be a treasure map for you. It can be you can it can tell you where to go to hit pay dirt and like all that, but or it can be travel log, like what you did here and what you did there, you know. And sometimes people get a little narcissistic. No, not dog people.
No way.
Where they want like all their names on the pedigree. I don't want to share the credit with anybody. Well, when you go in the ring, they don't care who if your arch nemesis bred the father. They don't care. You're showing your dog. You know, you don't get to bring the pedigree in and show the judge and wow him with it. You know, that's just that's your blueprint you're working from. But make your if for show dogs, make your choices that are going to move you the furthest up in the ring as far as like the best quality and know why.
Yeah, and so I mean that's a good way to wrap this up. And if I learned anything based on the last sentence, this last statement you just said, we're looking for a show dog, and so we want a show dog and know your type. So in my mind, it's like probably gonna, based on this whole conversation, I want a good show dog. Probably looking for some line breeding in there. That type is
Bingo.
doubled down on. People knew what they wanted. They bred it, line bred it. Probably gonna get a pretty good show dog out of it.
Bingo. You got it,
I
kid.
learned something from this podcast, so hopefully everybody else did too. So that's
And
awesome.
rehash it's free fun to rehash it because it's like, you know, I don't know. I love looking at the old pedigrees and stuff because it is like strolling down memory lane.
Well, and everybody needs that. New people, old people alike. We all need it. Like sometimes it's a good refresher, and then when you have newer people, in it, it's like it's just a freaking sponge trying to take everything in, and the more you take in, sometimes some of it leaks out, and it's just like, oh yeah, that I totally forgot that was super important to me 6 months ago, and like I've been taking in so much other information, and things have been going so crazy. It's like I totally forgot about the importance of that, and so it's like a good refresher of like again, and it even made me like this whole episode and conversation sparked of like what should I really breed with my tri bitch that I have going on right now? Like, it kind of like makes me think about that coming up soon.
Hey, refresher course for all of us. And sometimes just stepping back and looking at analytically, you can see it in a very different light.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a really good conversation. Thank you to everybody that's still here and listening. And make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. You're following us on Facebook. All the things that can help us out and help our podcast grow. We have so many good topics coming up. One of which being line breeding versus outcrossing. We have progesterone
Progesterone.
testing, insemination. So we have some really good topics coming up, but we always want suggestions from you. What do you guys want to hear? So you can get those submitted to the tackboxpodcast at gmail.com. You can submit them on our Facebook page. You can just message us. I mean, probably message me because Dale gets so many dang messages that it's hard to keep up with. Yeah. Send it to me and I'll get it on the list of things that we want to talk about, and then we'll just do a listener episode. So, any final last words on this topic conversation before we wrap up this episode, Dale?
Hey, no, it was a great one. And I think everybody should take a minute and like look through those pedigrees and really, kind of go all the way through them. Kind of even though you've had them for a long time, it's still a good read.
It's a good read, and just see where you have this like favorite dog that you have, or this what, just pull out the pedigree and just see where it came from, just for fun. Just kind of look through of like, oh, my dog came from here. Kind of like we do a 23andMe, even if it's just for like, oh, this dog is related to this dog 10 years ago from here. I mean, I forgot about that.
All
All
right.
right, everybody. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for joining me, Dale, and we will talk to you guys all soon. We'll see you later.